Hi, well, welcome to this session of Meet the Candidate, and my guest on the phone is Ann Davison Sattler, and she is running for Lieutenant Governor. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this unusual way today.
It's our pleasure to host any statewide candidates that we hand to get to have a chat this way. It's just a chance to get acquainted and learn a little bit about where did you grow up and go to school and some of those early experiences that shape all of our lives.
I think that's a fantastic thing. I must comment that we don't really get the opportunity to talk about that aspect. I've learned as a candidate very frequently, so I think that's a critical piece, and I really appreciate your special perspective of doing this. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and did all of my schooling there in public education, all through K through 12. And then I went to Baylor University for my college, for undergrad. I started as a piano major and realized I probably was not the one suited to be a concert pianist, so switched modes into sociology. And then used my summers to do volunteer work. I did some volunteer work in Iowa, and then 2 summers I did over in Australia, working with at-risk youth, with refugees who had gone there for safe haven, and things like that. So that's kind of my background. Grew up playing soccer. Played soccer at Baylor. Was into cycling and lots of extracurricular activities like that. But that's kind of me in a nutshell from until I became an adult.
Okay. And after you graduated and you got out what were some early work experiences?
Well, it's interesting. My late father was a chemical engineer and didn't quite know what I would be able to do for work with my undergraduate degree in sociology. But oddly enough, I went to Washington, D.C. after graduating from Baylor because I wanted to work in a nonprofit or non-government organization working specifically with and for on behalf of refugees. And so I did part of my I did a summer program in Thailand at Baylor as well. And during my time, I also got to work in a United Nations refugee camp on the border of Cambodia. So people were still fleeing the remnants of civil war within Cambodia in the early 90s. And so I was able to be there, and that started to really culminate a lot of my early adult focus and work. Because I had worked with homeless individuals and people coming out of prison at what were called halfway homes, being their first new friend as they were coming out of prison, someone who couldn't judge their past. But really being in that refugee camp really formed how I think about a lot of things in the world, because I had worked with people who were homeless in Waco, but these were people that really, they had no homeland. And so it was really a poignant time for me to get to know my translator and understand, that his child was born in that camp. So these were critical times for me. So I moved to Washington, D.C. to try to get work in that area, which I found was very hard to do. But I put my resume in at the U.S. House of Representatives. They had a placement office at that time. So I submitted my resume, and little did we know that my degree was the determining factor for me getting called by a chief of staff from a congressman. They wanted someone to do casework, which is basically administrative social work. And there were 2 people with degrees in social work or sociology, and I was one of those 2. And I was hired for my first job and out of college doing casework. So I was happy to call my dad and say, my degree did help get that job. And so that was my first job, really just working was doing that. And it was for people that were in active military or were veterans who needed help just navigating the system of their benefits or needs that they had, people on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They would just write in and need some help with the large system, and I would help solve their problems and navigate all those systems for them.
Yeah, we could do a whole program on the value that the caseworkers in every congressional office, both parties,
Yes.
those people do in navigating federal bureaucracies.
Yes, because it really is nonpartisan work. We respond to any constituent, obviously, that writes in that needs help, because that's who you represent, is everybody.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like you would have a broad base of experience then at that federal level with some time in the congressional office.
It's true, but I think what it gives me more than that is the personal aspect that representation can have and should have, and I feel is drastically missing in Washington State.
I don't know if you can hear that, but I think we just had a thunderstorm hit overhead.
Oh.
So I see you were kind of working on the political side, in the nonpartisan side of it, but what prompted you to step in and into taking on a role and pursuing a role in partisan politics yourself?
Well, this many years later, I never had that as on my career. I spent about 10 years in professional sports. Things did not work. I was able to teach in Thailand and tried to get work within a group that was trying to write Cambodia's constitution. And just different things happened within my family, and I had to come back, and I ended up landing in professional sports, so pure opposite of really where I was looking to go, just to support myself, right? It was not necessarily something I was critically interested in, and spent a decade there, and then left to become a lawyer. And so really just now as a mother of young children in elementary school, I've had to answer their questions for years about what they observe around them, which here in Seattle is a lot of people that are clearly in need. And so when I had to come to the realization that work I did in that refugee camp, the conditions for people were more hygienic and more humane and more compassionate there than we were allowing people to subsist along the sides of our roads and sidewalks here in Seattle. I decided to become politically engaged, and I ran for Seattle City Council and got through to the general election in November of 2019. I got 40% of the vote, and it is still time to continue that conversation and make sure we have political balance and voices those are from people that are normally disengaged from the process, because we really do need to all speak up and be a part.
Okay. Well, coming into the last couple of questions, one is to describe how you see the responsibilities of the office of Lieutenant Governor.
It is a critical piece where it is the culmination of our approaches to problems from across our state. It is the place where we should be seeing political balance, where we should see input from both sides, from people that normally don't have a seat at the table, whether they are the power brokers or they're the ones who normally are left out of the conversation. It needs to be an even playing field regardless of the representation, because it's for all of Washington. We will be better when we allow everyone to have a voice at the table and in our approaches. So my legal background in mediation and arbitration, I think, would be extremely helpful. My unique perspective and background being in Seattle for 23 years and my background where it was not planned to be in politics, I think would add a perspective that we really could use. Which is just the average everyday person that isn't putting politics on the map for a career and going up the ladder.
Okay, and that brings us to that closing remarks. You're as a lawyer, you understand we get to the summary at the end. Why should people vote for Ann Davison Sattler for Lieutenant Governor?
I am a voice we have not heard in our state. I am new to politics, but I am already endorsed by our state Senate Republican leader, Senator Schuessler, our House Republican leader, J.T. Wilcox, and over a dozen other currently Republican elected leaders across our state, as well as former Governor Dan Evans and former Secretary of State Sam Reed. We want to see a Republican statewide that has the ability to win in the general election and give us a platform across the state to talk about policies and have it come from a voice that is able to be welcoming so that the middle ground becomes wider for everybody.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ann. I'm so glad we could manage to fit this into your busy day.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
90 million Christians are eligible to vote.
40 million didn't.
That's 45% of eligible Christians not voting.
We can change that.
We believe We Vote was designed to arm people of faith with information on candidates
And how they line up with biblical and constitutional principles.
It's simply WeBelieveWeVote.com.
We're on a mission to rev up the 2020 election.
Tell your friends, your neighbors, and especially your pastors to rev up.
Be an educated voter.
Arm yourself with truth based on the Word of God.
2020, rev up.
Register, educate, vote.
Rev up.
Rev up.
Rev up 2020.